Our top story on Diaspora Digital Media comes from the Middle East, specifically the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Following the ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States, experts are questioning whether Israel will fully adhere to the terms of the deal. Israel's primary objective in this war remains the complete dismantling of Hamas, raising concerns about the long-term sustainability of the ceasefire. In a significant development, Israel's military chief, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, has resigned, taking responsibility for the failure of Israeli security forces to prevent the October 7 Hamas attack. Halevi admitted that Israel has not achieved all its military objectives in Gaza and acknowledged the failure to adequately protect Israeli citizens. The attack, which marked the beginning of 2023 war between Israel and Hamas, resulted in over 1,200 deaths and the abduction of around 250 people from the Israeli side, while more than 45,000 dead from the Palestinian side. Israeli primary objective remained the complete annihilation of Hamas, a goal that has yet to be achieved. Following the ceasefire agreement, Hamas is determined to demonstrate that it is still a formidable force. A recent image released by the group's military wing served as a symbolic moment in Gaza, showcasing their strength and sending a clear message to Israel that Hamas is far from being destroyed. Israel's military has claimed to have killed tens of thousands of Hamas members during the 15 months of conflict. Yet, in the days following the ceasefire announcement, signs suggest that Hamas' influence remains strong in Gaza. The group asserts that its fighters are still a formidable force and continue to operate. However, despite the show of apparent control, there is little doubt that Hamas' political and military leadership has been significantly weakened, with many of its top leaders assassinated by Israel. With the fighting in Gaza now at a halt, Israeli officials believe that ceasefire could give Hamas an opportunity to regroup and rearm. Dr. Herzi Halevi, a senior fellow in geopolitics and security at the Royal United Service Institute for Defense in London and the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C., was asked in an interview with DW what the resignation of the IDF chief reveals about Israel's strategy in Gaza and the current state of Hamas.
Of course, 1,200 people were killed in the October 7th attacks. More than 60,000 have been killed in Gaza since then. You mentioned the ICC warrant on Deif of Hamas. Of course, Israel's prime minister and former defense minister are both indicted by the ICC, and there's a case at the ICJ on plausible genocide. So it's important to put all of this into the correct context. When it comes to Hamas and its strength within the Strip, unfortunately, this is entirely inevitable. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, well, now former Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, mentioned last week that Hamas has more or less replenished the number of fighters in its ranks, despite having had many of them killed over the past year. But when you've had a war waged on Gaza of this brutality over the past year or so, it's inevitable that people are going to flock to any militant group that they consider to be fighting. Whether or not we agree with that is another question, of course, but it's entirely to be expected. Anybody involved in counterinsurgency studies will tell you that. And when you don't have any alternatives, and I think this is something else that is very clear. You mentioned like the Hamas police force and so on. Of course, there's been the suggestion from many actors in the international community that the Palestinian Authority should return to Gaza in order to govern. And Israel has balked at that idea, has vetoed that idea.
Yes.
And if you don't have the Palestinian Authority returning, then who's going to run it?
Dr. Halevi was further asked whether Hamas has been truly weakened.
Any standing that it has in Gaza, I think, is weakened as well, despite the fact that I think the people of Gaza hold Israel far more responsible for their plight than they do Hamas, of course, because it's Israel that's destroyed nearly all of the Strip. But the question will be, where do they go from here, right? And the ceasefire proposal, what I think should really be termed a truce. I don't think this is a ceasefire. Whether or not it will hold is an open-ended question. The Israelis, if you look at the Israeli press, they're actually quite public about the fact that they don't expect it to hold. That Netanyahu has been reported as telling his own cabinet that return to war is entirely possible and likely. That the finance minister, Smotrich, has been reported saying he's staying in the cabinet because he believes that Israel will return to the war on Gaza before the end of this phase. That's all awash in the Israeli press. So the question will be then, what does Hamas do in that kind of situation and scenario? It doesn't have many friends. And the question of, quote unquote, the day after is an open-ended one. Is this the day after? Are we actually living the day after already?
Also, David Hayes, editor-in-chief of Middle East Eye, stated that Israel has failed to achieve any of the objectives it set for itself 15 months ago. Please take a look.
Well, Israel has achieved none of the objectives it set itself 15 months ago. It set itself the objective of collapsing Hamas. Hamas is still very, very much a fighting force, and it's in control of Gaza. The sight of Hamas in pristine Toyota Jeeps and new uniforms delivering the 3 hostages in the middle of Gaza City shocked the Israeli public, who'd been fed a diet of news saying that Hamas had been collapsed. Here they were, back again, emerging like ghosts from the rubble, being cheered by the crowds, in control after 15 months of total war. And it said to themselves, what the hell's been going on? Why have over 400 of our soldiers died for so-called total victory over Hamas, when we can see before our eyes that the Hamas fighters have got pristine new uniforms and are in total control of Gaza?
Every war that begins eventually ends at the negotiating table, raising the question of whether those who start wars truly act in the interest of the majority. The irony is that those who initiate conflicts are often the least affected. Their families remain protected, while those who suffer the most are the ones who ultimately immortalize them. With that, we wrap up today's program on Diaspora Digital Media. Stay tuned for more updates as the situation unfolds. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments and follow us for the latest insights. Also, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell to get alerted as we drop a new video. I am Ibrahim Umaru Ase. Until next time.